Hello there everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, it's time for another tier list, and we're going to be ranking all of the 2021 fusions. And actually, fun thing when I was going through this, I thought that there was one per month and we'd have 12. They were actually 13. They squeezed one extra one in towards the end of the year. So we actually had 13 fusion or fragment collector events over the course of the year, giving guaranteed champions, 12 of them legendary and 1 of them epic. What we're going to do in today's video, we are going to be rating them on this scale. So from S tier all the way down to D tier. S tier being absolutely incredible champions, even in endgame accounts. And D tier being, I wouldn't even bother building them, they're terrible. This video was, by the way, very much inspired by one of my favorite content creators. He has a YouTube channel as well, but it's WSoul13. He posted this one on Reddit where he goes through and he breaks down all of this stuff. I really recommend, I'm going to link it down in the comments, I really recommend checking out his posts. He does a lot of free to play and low spender guides. So, you know, how do you approach each new fusion? He has guides on faction wars, on Doom Tower, tons of really good stuff, really worth a watch. Or worth a read, excuse me. In terms of worth a watch, he does have a channel on YouTube as well. Let me throw a like here on this video. I think he just posted. Yeah, he posted his video on this particular topic. But yeah, he's like a small channel on YouTube. But yeah, really good content. I really like his stuff. Like especially his Reddit posts were, for me, these were a resource that I relied on. You know, when I was playing Raid, when I was learning Raid, it was absolutely a huge influence. So I really recommend it. And yeah, he's inspired this list. And yeah, I'm gonna go through the champions in the order that he ranked them as well. But I'm gonna give you my thoughts because I actually disagree. And probably disagree with most people in terms of how good these fusions actually were. But yeah, this is my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is. I can already predict some of the comments are going to be outraged, and it's going to be kind of funny. Yes, without any further ado though, let's dive in. Hope you like the background as well, by the way. So first of all, the first champion who WSoul actually thought was the worst fusion of the year, I actually completely disagree with. It's Sigmund. Yeah, Sigmund, guys. I actually really think Sigmund is a great champion. And I'm, in fact, I basically start off champions in the B tier. If they're doing something good, I'm going to move them up. If they're doing something bad, I'll move them down. I'm actually putting Sigmund up in the A tier. I actually am putting him up there. I'm not going to put him into S tier. I don't think he's quite that good. I'm putting him sort of towards the back here at least to start. But I think Sigmund is pretty fantastic. If we jump into the index and we take a look at Sigmund, what is he doing? Why do I think he's so good? And why do I think people overlook him so much? So his A1 removes shield buffs, can remove random buffs from the target, and has, when it's booked up, 100% chance to remove a buff when attacking bosses. His A2 is an AoE attack, hits 2 times, each hit having a 75% chance to provoke, so it's basically guaranteed to do an AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown when it's booked, and it also puts decreased attack. This is an incredible move. This is so good. Like, I talked about how in my Vildrax guide, Vildrax AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown is a brilliant move. This is an AoE provoke alongside decreased attack. Fantastic for getting you through Doom Tower waves. Fantastic for getting you through dungeon waves, any sort of wave type content. It's amazing. And the decreased attack feature also makes it really good for bosses. So any Doom Tower bosses, dungeon bosses, Hydra boss, anything, really good. His A3 Shield of the Realm books down to a 3-turn cooldown, puts shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 30% of his max HP, and he's got really good base HP. Also puts 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns. He has, whenever he's attacked, chance to decrease duration of all buffs in the attacker by a turn, 40% chance against bosses, and a 40% defense in Doom Tower battles. Aura. Guys, this guy's fantastic. Great base stats, bit slow, but other than that, great. Lots of resistance as well. But yeah, I think he's just... Think about this in a new account. I think the issue that happened with Sigmund was he came out and everyone already, you know, all the endgame players, all the content creators already had Brogni. Brogni was already there. And Brogni is, let's be real, Brogni's better than Sigmund. Quite a lot better. Brogni's like God tier shielding, yeah? God tier shielding. So in comparison to Brogni, we said, you know, shield buff and all allies. Well, Brogni's shield is better. And yeah, it is. But if you're a newer player, if you don't have Brogni, right? Or maybe even if you do, but you're lacking control champions, what does Sigmund do for you? He's kind of come in to every single dungeon in the game. He can do work in every single dungeon, controlling the waves, debuffing the bosses, right? In Doom Tower waves as well. If you think about it, against a tough Doom Tower wave, turn 1, he puts decreased attack and an AoE provoke out. He controls them. Then turn 2, he puts this big shield and strengthen on your allies. Right, so he's protecting your allies even then. You've got 2 turns of shield and strengthen to protect you from what the enemy's doing, and then he's back into a provoke again. I think, you know, he's going to be great against Hydra. Throw him into the Hydra boss. He's going to be removing some random buffs. He's going to be putting shields and strengthen on you, keeping your team alive, decrease attack, doing good AoE damage as well. He's super tanky. He's defense-based damage. When he gets attacked, he can decrease the duration of the buffs if you don't have consistent block buffs or buff removal, which for newer players you probably won't. You go against the Scarab King, right? The Scarab King, one of the most annoying bosses in Doom Tower. Awful. Probably the second worst boss after Bommel. The second worst. But it was one of the first ones released. So us who've been playing for a long time, we've got teams set up to beat Scarab King. What about newer players? How do they beat Scarab King? You need to have shields up, otherwise he counterattacks you. It's awful. Again, Sigmund comes in and he's putting shields up for 2/3 of these turns, and you can build his resistance up pretty well because he's got really good resistance. You could build him for that, and then if the Scarab King steals your buffs, he can remove those buffs. He can remove the shields, all that sort of stuff. I think he's great. Like, he's just going to be great across the board in so much sort of content. I think absolutely, completely underrated champion. I think so underrated. And yeah, if you think about my free-to-play, sorry to go on about Sigmund, I think he really is this good though. If I look at my free-to-play Doom Tower clear team, we're throwing in Syl of the Drakes, we're throwing in Vizix, and we're throwing in, from Doom Tower normal, we're throwing in Archmage Helmet. I tell you, if you've got Sigmund going into that team as well, he's coming in, giving you a defense lead, he's giving you shields, he's giving you strengthen, he's another source of AoE provoke, bringing decreased attack. You throw in someone then with an increased defense on that team, and they're going to be smacking really hard, and you've got tons of crowd control covered. I think he's brilliant for it. So yeah, Sigmund, totally underrated, and actually a really good champion. Next up, we have Vildrax. Vildrax, in comparison, is a really bad champion. I'm putting Vildrax all the way down in the D tier. I almost put him in C. Almost put him in C, but I am going all the way down to D. I just don't really see a reason to build this champion, to be honest. He's clearly designed to be a Hydra champion, right? He has accuracy in all battles, so that goes into the Hydra. He can put Leech with his A1 at a decent chance, 50% chance to Leech. It's okay. He's got an AoE attack that puts Hex on 3-turn cooldown, and then he has a 4-turn cooldown attack that increases the duration of enemy buffs by 1 turn. It can put skills on cooldown. I don't know. And then he's got this stuff where he can steal healing, but it doesn't work against bosses. So I don't know. Like, where do you use him, really? This is the thing. I just don't see him being that good. Maybe against Hydra. You know, he applies Hex. He can increase debuffs. Maybe there's a play that can be made there. I do think that the Cleansing Head makes this a bit awkward. But maybe there's a bit of a play, and Leech is good against Hydra. But is he worth building? Is he worth bringing over just other champions? And I think no, he's not worth building. On top of the facts, look at these books. He needs, I think, 17 books to actually make him work, which is absurd. He needs a crazy amount of epic books. I actually think a good champion for doing that sort of debuff extension for Hydra, I actually think there's something to be said for Thylesia. Squishy champion, you need to put her in like Stalwart set or maybe a Lifesteal set, but she can apply Hex when attacking people under decreased defense. She's an AoE increase debuff duration on 3-turn cooldown, and she has an AoE decreased defense on a 3-turn cooldown, and then her A1 can debuff spread. I think Thylesia does what Vildrax does way better for Hydra, and yeah, I just don't see a use. I just don't think there's a point in building him. A few people have built him out. They think he's okay. So I don't know. Let me know. Am I underrating Vildrax? I think in best case, I think he's really just a C tier champion though. Maybe there will be some weird comps that build around him. But I think once you get Mithrala Lifebane from Hydra, I don't know if you'll really be using Vildrax. Next up, we have Rorik. I know I'm going to put Rorik in the C tier. I know you guys kind of like Rorik. You guys left me comments on some previous videos saying Rorik's actually pretty good. And I looked at his kit and I actually thought, you know what? He is a bit better than I thought. I do think it's funny. He looks like this absolute unit. He looks like an absolute tank. And then you look at his stats and he's actually quite squishy. He's quite squishy, but he hits really hard. He doesn't quite look like that. He looks like he should be way tankier, like a defense-based damage dealer. But he is what he is. But he has an A1, hits 2 times. Each hit 40%, books up to 50% chance to stun. So he's pretty much always stunning on his A1. Very good chance to stun on that A1, which is a really good A1. His A2 is a single target hit. When it's booked up, 100% chance to decrease target's turn meter by 75%. If it fully depletes their turn meter, it will stun all other enemies for 1 turn. So this is actually a great move. You know, for Doom Tower waves in particular, I think this is great. Faction Wars, Dungeons is not bad for controlling the waves. I think it's good. The thing that puts me off it is that it is inconsistent, right? If you don't quite get that turn meter down to 0, it's not going to do the AoE stun. So it's not entirely consistent, and that is what puts me off. I feel like you need to combo him and build him with someone else that does decrease turn meter, and then he goes next, and then he triggers the AoE stun. And I feel like that's a bit awkward. His A3 hits reasonably hard because it ignores 50% of target's defense. Single target hit, 3 turn cooldown, and he always uses it when he's counterattacking. And yeah, he's immune to stuns. He takes less damage from bosses. Bit of a speed aura in all battles. So he can come into like a Doom Tower team, bring you a speed aura, you know, do some AoE stuns if you can set it up, and he'll do okay damage, okay single target damage. I don't know. I just feel like when you put it all together, he's decent. He's okay, but he doesn't wow me. Like, his damage isn't that amazing to really wow me. It's all single target especially. His crowd control is actually very good, but it's a little bit inconsistent, and that does put me off with it for sure. But I mean, either way, like he will take you through some of that stuff. He'll CC the waves, and then he'll do pretty decent damage and be okay tankiness-wise against bosses. Like, he'll be okay. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's maybe something to be said for this guy. I know that you guys, some of the people are leaving comments saying they use him more, so let me know. But for me, I think he's C tier. I'm like, I wouldn't really rush out to build him, to be honest. I feel like you're most likely going to get other options that are probably a bit better. Next up, then, we have Vlad. Vlad is one of the most hated fusions of all time. I'm going to get in trouble for doing this, guys. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm actually going to put Vlad up in the A tier. I'm putting Vlad up in A. I actually think that Vlad is way better than people think. I think the issue here with Vlad is that I think there's two problems with Vlad that make people hate him more than he deserves. Issue 1 with Vlad is that I feel like it's a case of endgame-itis, where you know, a lot of the content creators, a lot of players are looking at him and they go, is he as good as my Trunda? No, he's not as good as Trunda, so he's useless then, right? I think that's how a lot of people looked at him, which I think is really unfair. It's kind of colored by the fact that players who've been playing for years are going to have a lot of really good nukers. But that's just not true of, you know, 90% of players in this game who haven't been playing for that long. And I think the other thing is that as a Void Legendary, I think he's actually a really solid champion, but he's not like OP on the levels of Sisk, of Sifi and Krisk. And I think, again, that puts people off. They feel like he's diluting the Void pool, which is perhaps a fair point, for sure. But I'm not going to talk about that too much in today's video. I want to sort of assess him as he stands on his own. And I think as a fusion that you could get, I actually think he's fantastic. He's a great champion. Being a Void nuker, AoE nuker, is actually a really useful thing for players, because it means that you can put him into any team. It doesn't matter the affinity of the dungeon. It doesn't matter the affinity of the champions you're fighting in the arena. Whatever, he will hit them for good damage, which is a real problem that you face on earlier accounts, right? Where you don't have a bunch of different nukers that you can swap in or out depending on the affinities that you're facing. You kind of need one nuker that does it all, and Vlad can absolutely do that. His A1 is actually great. AoE, a single target attack, decreases target's max HP by 30% the damage inflicted, and also heals them by 30%. So there's a built-in lifesteal to this. It's built-in lifesteal kit to this, and also a bit of a built-in destroy set. Makes him really good, again, for dealing with that Scarab King boss. He can keep himself alive a little bit, and he can decrease that max HP. Great for fighting the Scarab King, which is a huge block point for most new players. And yeah, the decreased max HP, not that useful yet anywhere else, but the healing makes him quite decent. His A2 then is his AoE nuke, and I think this is pretty good. 3-turn cooldown when it's booked, attacks all enemies when it's booked up, 100% chance to place Leech for 2 turns, which is great. Actually, that's really nice. Then it also has a 100% chance of stealing 50% turn meter from Bannerlord, Sacred Order, High Elf factions. Otherwise, 100% chance of decreasing turn meter by 50% if targets are not from those factions. This is actually super good nuke. This is way underrated. AoE Leech is very useful. Fun thing about Vlad, actually, guys. Really fun thing about Vlad. I want to give another shout out to another content creator, Tyraku. I should probably apologize. I paused this on a really bad frame. There we go. That's a more normal face. Sorry, dude. But Tyraku, really great content as well. I thought this is a really interesting video where he was showing that, hey, Vlad can easily solo Minotaur's Labyrinth for you. Why can Vlad easily do it? And he doesn't even need any special kits because he's got great AoE damage. And between the leech and the self-healing on his A1, he can just, you put him in your normal damage gear and he can easily sustain himself through that while putting out really good damage and clearing it really fast. Is he the only champion who can do this? No, of course not. But he can do it super easily without needing specific gear or specific build or anything. He can do it, which is really cool. Really good as well for, again, a bunch of Doom Tower waves and bosses. Stealing their turn meter, knocking them back, putting out Leech so you can heal through it. Leech against bosses, Leech against Hydra. Really nice stuff in the arena. I mean, I think the point where you get him, where he's amazing for your account, is the point where it gets really difficult, where you're looking to push into gold, right, in Classic Arena, trying to finish your missions, and you're running into those Arbiters. That's where it gets really hard, and he steals that turn meter from Arbiter. Very useful thing to do. His A3 then, Mind Shroud, double hitter, decreased defense, block active skills, both debuffs are placed, perfect veil on himself. So this is a hard-hitting single target move. Decreased defense, great thing as well to bring. Block active skills, useful for Doom Tower in particular. Perfect veil, again, quite useful. I'm not sure if he can place block active skills against the Hydra. If he can, being a self-veiling champion for that, makes him really useful there as well, to be honest. Then he gets, his passive is kind of bad. Revive on death whenever he kills a champion. Like, it's okay, but you're not rushing out to pick up this one. Crit rate in arena battles is also pretty bad, to be honest. But he's got solid base stats. He's reasonably tanky. He's got great speed. Yeah, he's got some good stats as well. So yeah, I think you put it all together. And like, if you look at this from like even a player in the mid game, Vlad is giving you a nuker that's actually really, he does a good hit in arena with a really nice turn meter and leech effect. Great for arena, great for nuking through waves, great for nuking through dungeons as well, with a 3-turn cooldown AoE nuke, with that control effect, with the leech effect. Fantastic for progressing through dungeons. He's a huge upgrade over your starters. I'd actually say he's a huge upgrade over any epic nuker for sure. And yeah, this makes him good against Scarab King alongside this and this. Just a bunch of useful things against Scarab King, Doom Tower bosses. I believe he's great against Dark Fae as well because of the leech. Again, you can bring in a team of nukers against Dark Fae and he can keep them alive. There's a lot of great stuff Vlad does. I'm being so hype about Vlad because he gets so much hate. Like, he's absolutely gets so much hate and he's way better than these reviews would lead you to believe. I actually think Vlad is worth building. I have mine up at 60. I want to book him out at a certain point. I've got, you know, as if you watch my legendary pull from the extra champion event, you know, I've got some better legendaries to book up right now, but Vlad is very solid, actually. Way better than people think. Next up, we have Yoshi. And I think for me, I'm actually going to put Yoshi up in the A tier as well. Again, another super underrated champion. You can check out my Yoshi guide. You can check out my Doom Tower guide. I think the thing that makes it hard for me with ranking Yoshi compared to Sigmund, where I look at Sigmund and say, Sigmund is fantastic everywhere, which is great, especially for newer players. Thing about Yoshi, Yoshi really is a Doom Tower specialist, but he is amazing for Doom Tower. What does he do? You're going into Doom Tower hard. What are the hard thing about waves in Doom Tower hard? 1, they're super fast. 2, they have incredibly high resistance. And 3, because they have such high basic stats, essentially, if they get turns, they're going to rip you apart. So you want to control them. You want to keep them controlled. Yoshi comes in. Speed Aura covers the speed. He brings you increased accuracy buff, which is amazing on a 3-turn cooldown, so you can bust through those resistances. And the same move also puts out True Fears. Not 100% reliable form of CC, but a really nice form of CC to add on. His A1 stuns, his HP burns and decreased accuracy in his A2. He has a fantastic kit for getting through Doom Tower hard. I actually use him in all of my Doom Tower hard wave teams, and he's just a staple for it. He was a huge part of what enabled me to go in there and do way better. I know I've seen a lot of other content creators recommend Drexthar as your lead. Yoshi basically does what Drexthar does for Doom Tower hard, but he does it better, is the way I'd say it. I think he does it a lot better. Yeah, I think Yoshi is great. And he's obviously great for faction wars and that stuff. He's okay for arena, but he's not really good for dungeons. So yeah, I still think he's worth the A rank because he's so good to boost you through that Doom Tower hard. He's so good for that. Watch my guide. He's so good. But he's not as good in other areas, so it makes it tricky. Next up, we've got Mother Cybele. Again, another really underrated champion. I'm going to put her, I think, in the B tier is about right for Mother Cybele. It's a little bit hard to say because she's such an interesting and unique champion. It's hard to say. Number one, she's got an amazing speed aura, and she's got really good base stats, incredible speed, for example. So she's got great stats. Her A1 is really good when it's booked up. AoE attack with a 50% chance to place decreased speed. Fills her turn meter by 15%. She's amazing for Hydra, actually. This move makes her super good for Hydra because she's going quickly, pumping out actually a lot of damage with War Master and placing decreased speed every single turn almost, keeping constant decreased speed out. Makes her very good. Her A2 then, Revive on Death, increase defense all allies for 2 turns, 3 turn cooldown when booked. Her A3 is really weird. She like swaps HP with champions and does weird stuff. So I don't really know how you play around that for sure. And then a really interesting passive too, fully heals the ally with the lowest HP whenever she's killed, heals all allies by 20% their max HP, and fills their turn meters whenever she's revived. Again, great for Hydra. She's also really good for some more endgame arena stuff, right? Really good for arena. I think she's going to be really helpful in tag arena, and if arena becomes a bigger part of this year like they've planned, I think Mother Cybele could again come into it more. So yeah, the stuff that I think she's obviously, I mean, her A3 in particular, you can read it yourselves, is really wacky. It's really wacky. And it's like, how do we play around it? We're playing around this Revive on Death. It's not easy to play around. But she does work super well in those sort of defensive comps for arena. She works really well, again, in Hydra. And I think outside of that, she is going to be actually really good for progressing through Doom Tower, dungeons, all that sort of stuff, because she's going to be keeping your team alive with this. She's going to be upping their speed, decreasing enemy speed, putting out actually decent damage. I think she's actually pretty good for that. So yeah, Mother Cybele I think is actually super underrated. I can understand though why she was underrated, because she is so weird in what she does. And honestly, I'm still not 100% sure how to build her and make her work in teams. But I think she's definitely a champ that's worth revisiting. I think very, very underrated. Next up from the same faction, we have Versulf. And I'm going to put Versulf in the B tier as well. Versulf, I think, is also kind of underrated and a really solid champ. I think solid is actually a perfect word. He is the tankiest tank that ever did tank. Monstrous tanky stats. He is a bit slow, but really tanky champion. And he's coming in. His A1 has a chance to provoke. Also gives him a shield. This makes him super tanky. Again, he's putting out a big shield and he's got good defense. So it's really keeping his health stable. His A2 actually does a ton of damage. 3 turn cooldown when booked. AoE attack. Puts an extra hit on anyone that has basically hard crowd control buffs on them. Debuffs on them. And yeah, he also places Leech with this as well. So it's an AoE attack. When it gets the double hit, I believe it is the hardest hitting HP-based nuke in the game. He is the hardest hitting champ. I think he hits harder than Magnar. He hits harder than Sir Nick for sure. He hits really hard. It also puts out Leech. So it's actually a fantastic move, though triggering it can be a little tricky. And then his A3 is also fantastic. Increased defense on all allies. Also ally protection on everyone else as well on a 3-turn cooldown. And then he can provoke. A low chance to provoke when he's hit, which is okay. HP aura in all battles too, which is nice. But yeah, he's just a beast. He's really good for clan boss. If you're doing a non-unkillable team, number one, he puts out really good damage, but he's super tanky. And the fact that he brings increased defense, ally protection on such a low cooldown makes your team so durable. And then putting out Leech helps your team heal up. They don't need lifesteal sets. They don't need regen or whatever. They can heal up just from this. So he gives so much survivability to your team while still doing good damage himself. I think he's a great champ. I think he's actually really solid, really good. He's not really going to fit into endgame speed teams because, you know, you don't need him there. But for faction wars and for progressing through the game, if you need like a tanky champ to just make your team live, you can't really do any better than Versulf. So I think he's a solid B tier. Very solid B tier for me. Next up, again, this is going to make people rage super hard. I can see the outrage. This is an overrated champion. Ashlan, I'm putting him in the B tier. I actually think he's worse than Vlad. I'll talk about that in a minute. But Ashlan, let's look at him first. Let's look at, people are going to be flipping out. Ashlan, people think Ashlan's amazing. I have him built out, fully booked, geared, everything. And I think he's decent. I think he's good. But he didn't quite live up to the hype, to the expectations that were set for me. So his A1 is decent. Double hitter, 50% chance of placing decreased defense. It's a good solid A1, not too bad. His A2 is actually a solid single target hit as well, 3-turn cooldown. Nice thing about this, it ignores increased defense, strength, and ally protection. So a really nice arena move actually to like target down and nuke down a single person. Good for that. If he gets a kill, it gives him a shield for 20% HP, and it revives an ally at 40% HP with a shield as well. They don't have any turn meter, so they're still pretty vulnerable, but it's a nice thing to have, especially in Faction Wars. The revive is really good. But yeah, so it's a good single target hit. And then it's his A3 that's the big draw. Light of Sanctity, AoE attack, that's a 100% chance to stun when it's fully booked. And this hits hard. It's a hard-hitting attack. It does hit hard. It also removes all buffs from targets under Veil or Perfect Veil, and it puts Weaken if they have them removed, right? And he does that before he does the attack. So I think, by the way, he also has a really cool passive too. Fills his turn meter whenever an ally is hit, and decreases damage by 25% if their attack is lower than his, which is going to be most people. He has a really high base attack. So it's a really good passive as well. I think that for Arena, Ashlan is fantastic in the Arena, right? This move has a 4-turn cooldown when it's booked up, which is actually very long for a damage dealer, I think. A 4-turn AoE, and it's his only AoE. But in the Arena, that doesn't really matter. He basically needs to just do this once, and it should have a big enough impact that it carries the battle. And I think it does that super well in Arena. It's also a very good counter to champions like Duchess, right? I think that's in particular where he shines. The one issue that you can run into is that, you know, Duchess, let's say she gets up... either he nukes them and kills them all before Duchess gets a go, but it's unlikely to kill Duchess because it doesn't hit hard enough through her passive. And then she revives everyone, and then you're left going, wow, okay, everyone's back alive, but my nuker doesn't have an AoE move for another like 4 turns. What do I do? It's a bit awkward in that sense. If Duchess goes first, it's still pretty good, but then she can still AoE revive afterwards. So, you know, he doesn't work as amazing, I think, in reality as it might seem on paper, but nonetheless, an AoE hard-hitting nuke that does a guaranteed stun is a great move. Very good. The thing that makes me rate him lower, though, is that just... I think in other forms of content, he's actually not that good. He's amazing for Arena, where cooldown isn't as important, but you put him into dungeons, you put him into Doom Tower waves, any of that sort of stuff, and actually a lot of other champions are better, just because they've got a shorter cooldown on their AoE nuke. They'll just do more damage, basically, is what happens, which is kind of what you're bringing them for. Yeah, I don't know. You can be a control champion, but I really prefer control champions with 3-turn cooldowns on their CC. I really prefer AoE nukers with 3-turn cooldowns on their CC. So when I look at the tier list, if I was on a brand new account, I would actually prefer Vlad overall, because Vlad with 3-turn cooldown on his AoE, Vlad's still going to do most of the job Ashlan does in Arena. Against most opponents, he's just going to one-shot them anyway, so it's fine. And yeah, for going through any dungeons or Doom Tower waves, the stun on Ashlan's move is certainly better than the turn meter decrease on Vlad's, but the shorter cooldown for dungeon stuff, again, just makes it better. He's going to clear through that stuff better. On a new account, I prefer to have Vlad, and also being Void Affinity as well. I actually would prefer Vlad, which is crazy. I know people are going to be outraged, but that is genuinely what I think. Next up, we have a champion that I find difficult to rate, and it's Rule the Huntsmaster. I find Rule's really difficult to rate. So Rule can actually do huge damage, but Rule is dependent upon Hex. People obviously don't, you can't really see, there's only 730 reviews for Rule. Rule's not really that popular, not that well liked, but I do think that Rule has endgame viability. This move, Unleash the Hunt, 3-turn cooldown, attacks all enemies, twice double hitter against enemies under Hex, and ignores 25% defense if there's 4 more enemies under Hex. This hits extremely hard. Like, this outdamages a Trunda. This is a huge, huge nuke, and Rule has extremely high base attack and crit damage and everything. But Rule's very squishy and pretty slow, which makes it awkward. interesting thing as well, Rule can set up for herself. I think it's a she. I don't know. He or she. I don't know. Let's say a she. I think it's a she. Rule can set up for herself. She gives everyone increased accuracy and then puts hex on all enemies. So nice thing here that she increases her accuracy first and then places hex, so it's easy to place the hex. She veils herself, perfect veils herself for 2 turns, and boosts her turn meter by 50%. You can maybe build potentially for arena some teams that will play around it, but it's kind of awkward. Like, you need her to be really fast, which is hard because her base speed is low. Build her super fast. She does the increased accuracy, applies the hex. Then you have another champion come in and CC them, which should be easy to land with the increased accuracy, so that Rule can get around to her next turn and then blow them all up. So there's some viability there, but it's difficult. I think where Rule gets really good is if you pair her with a hex, an AoE hexer. The issue is that the other hexers aren't very good, but Mithrala Lifebane, who incidentally is from the same faction, she is going to be absolutely OP. She is nuts good. And she has Sigil of Toxic Glory, 3-turn cooldown, AoE attack, puts hex, and also does increase attack on all allies. So I think in that situation, we could have a really powerful team here where she comes in, she does this AoE attack, boosts Rule's attack, and then Rule comes in and nukes. I think that could be really good in arena. That could be really good for speed farming dungeons. Could be really good for Hydra as well. So there's a whole bunch of really interesting options here with Rule. Makes it hard to rate Rule though. Crit rate in all battles isn't bad. Can place decreased defense in the A1, not bad. Transfers debuffs to targets under hex. So Rule, yeah, I find this quite difficult to rate Rule. I feel like up until this point, Rule's been actually kind of rubbish, just because it's just not worth the hassle of setting up the hex really. But I think with Mithrala coming in, that could really change things. So I actually don't know where to put Rule, to be honest. I think it's difficult. Rule might shoot up to S tier in the future. Depending on these hex champions, it might happen. Rule might shoot up there. I think for now, I'm going to leave Rule in like the B tier, maybe equal to Ashlan, but I find it difficult. I find it difficult because it really, the viability and the strength of Rule really depends on the viability and strength of other hex champions. Hence why up till now, it's been pretty terrible. But with Mithrala coming in, Rule suddenly becomes potentially very good. Like you put Rule in with, with Mithrala, Rule, I don't know, like Lydia and a Renegade, and they're going to rip through like everything, I think. We'll see when we get there. Next up, we have Herndig. Herndig is going to be my first S tier champion, though I think he's probably the weaker ones of the S tier. But Herndig is, compared to these nukers, I think Herndig is generally speaking at a level above. For most players, a level above. Herndig is really good. Great base stats across the board once again. A1 gives him an extra turn if he gets a kill and lowers the cooldown of his A3 by 2 turns, which is awesome. Then his A2 is an AoE attack, puts decreased defense and decreased accuracy for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. This hits hard. Great move. It's a great nuke, and it also has 2 really good debuffs. Super useful for basically everywhere in the game. Really good. And then his A3, really hard single target attack that depletes the target's turn meter, hits really hard, and then does a really hard AoE attack afterwards if he crits, which he basically always should. And this one puts weaken and can also potentially play some HP burns out as well. And yeah, he also gets turn meter whenever he's hit, gets turn meter whenever someone dies. Attack in arena battles is kind of crappy, but yeah, basically Herndig comes in and he's a monster. He has 2 extremely hard-hitting AoE moves. He has a hard-hitting single target move that gives him extra turns. He is a phenomenal Nightmare campaign farmer. He's going to be phenomenal in dungeons, in Doom Tower. The debuffs he brings are extremely useful as well. Really top-tier debuffs. So yeah, Herndig, he's just an absolute beast of a damage dealer. I know I've got a ton of comments from people saying, your Herndig's only level 50. Build up your Herndig. Build up your Herndig. I will at some point. His downside is he needs a lot of bucks. He needs an awful lot of bucks to buck him out, which kind of sucks, right? That slows him down for sure. I don't have those bucks right now, and I have plenty of AoE nukers, but I will build him out at some point, and he's fantastic. He's really good, endgame viable. Then we've got our final couple of champs. Tatura Rhymehide. I'm kind of a bit torn. I might put Tatura at the absolute pinnacle of the A tier. I'm not sure if Tatura quite makes it into S tier. I'm not 100% sure. Just in terms of, do you run Tatura and like all your endgame teams? I don't know, but pinnacle of A tier without question, because Tatura is really, really good. Again, incredible base stats, so good. Decrease accuracy, 100% chance to place it on the A1. Really nice against a bunch of these tough bosses like Hydra or Doom Tower bosses. Block debuffs, increase defense on all allies on a 3-turn cooldown. And then a really nice hitting AoE attack, Otherworld Breach on a 4-turn cooldown. Puts Perfect Veil on everyone and a shield on Tatura. And then reflex damage back, chance to freeze attackers. Increased defense in Doom Tower battles as well is fantastic. So yeah, great against Hydra with that Perfect Veil and the defense. Just the buffs and the debuffs, really good for Hydra. He can be the tank in the Spider Dungeon, which is a real pain in the ass for most players as well. He can tank through your Doom Tower waves, right? Protecting you and tanking up and freezing the attackers. He can easily tank through that damage. There's a lot Tatura does. I think Tatura is a really nice champion. Yeah, just a great defensive support that puts out a surprising amount of damage. Maybe I should put Tatura in the S tier. What? You know what? Yeah, let's put Tatura up in the S tier. I'd say actually fairly equal to Herndig. Yeah, Tatura is really good. I've convinced myself. Next up then, we have Iron Braggo. For me, Iron Braggo, again, is going up in that S tier. Absolutely. Absolute beast of a unit. Really, really beastie champion. Iron Braggo comes in. Again, solid base stats. He's a bit slow, but solid base stats. Huge defense and HP. Iron Braggo is a tank that deals big damage. Really hard-hitting A1, can decrease buffs. It's fine, it just hits hard. Then his A2, really powerful single-target attack, puts increased defense for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So without buff extenders or anything, Braggo, when he's booked up, can permanently keep increased defense on your team. Also, when booked, 100% chance to stun for 1 turn. 100% chance to stun for 2 turns if the target's under 2 or more buffs. So it's a massively hard-hitting single target nuke that also has got that CC and increased defense. Really good move. His A3 is amazing as well. Battlestorm, 3-turn cooldown when booked. When it's booked up, 75% chance to do an AoE provoke on a 3-turn cooldown. Super good. And also puts decreased attack on all enemies for 2 turns if he's under increased defense. So just guaranteed decreased attack, AoE, if he has increased defense on. So he goes in, he applies increased defense to your team, big single target nuke. Next turn he does big AoE nuke, decrease attack. Then he does a single target nuke with this, and then he's back into his thing, rotating through. And then his passive is amazing, increases defense of all allies by 10% of this champion's defense. You build him up at like 5,000 defense, and he's coming in and giving 500 bonus defense to everyone else on your team, which is incredible. 34 defense in Doom Tower battles. Yeah, Braggo is super good, super good. Amazing for tons of bosses in this game. Amazing for clan boss. He's actually part, I believe, of a lot of like the top clan boss teams, like super tanky teams. Braggo comes in. He's an absolute beast. His face textures, maybe these textures are a little bit dodgy on the chains, but that's okay. They also made his model bigger at one point. He was really small and they made him bigger to make him feel more badass. But yeah, Braggo is incredible. Super good. Yeah, he's a monster. Unfortunately, the only downside, and what I need to get around to this as well, shortage of legendary books. He needs a ton of legendary books as well. Absolutely gobbles up the books. He's a fiend for the books, which is kind of a theme of a lot of these fusions, unfortunately, which is what sort of holds you back from using them and why tier lists are kind of important. Then the best fusion, really for me, no question, it's Under Priest Brogni. Everyone saw it coming. Brogni is just god tier. He's on another level for sure. I'd almost need an S+ tier for Brogni, to be honest. Brogni comes in, can put HP burn in his A1, not bad. Then I think go to his A3, block debuffs, increase attack, and then a huge shield. He's got huge, really good stats here. 90 base resist, guys. Shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, equal to 30% of his max HP. Shield cannot be removed on a 3-turn cooldown. Massive shield, block debuffs, just great buffs for your team, really good. Then he comes in, and then he has an AoE attack that actually hits really hard, which can remove a random buff from all enemies, remove a random debuff from all allies, and then increase the value of shield buffs on all allies by 30% of the damage inflicted. This actually hits really hard. You build him up with decent crit rate and some accessories to up his attack, and this actually increases your shields a ton. He is part of the world record teams for Clan Boss, Demon Lord, because yeah, he just increases the shield so much, and you keep buff extending the shields, and you've got these enormous shields, like dwarfing your health bar. You can't even see your health bar anymore. Brogni enables that. His passive is also nuts. Whenever an ally under shield buffs is attacked, reflects 25% of the damage back. This can also trigger Giant Slayer Mastery, so it does a ton of damage, and then also heals allies by 25% of the damage inflicted on the shield. So he does a ton of healing, a ton of shielding, incredible buffs, a great debuff with HP burn. He grows your shields. The shields are healing. They're reflecting damage. He does way more damage than you could possibly expect. Resist Aura and Doom Tower as well. He's incredible basically everywhere in the game. Brogni is insanely good. Specializes in the hardest bosses in the game. Brogni is in there, will help you survive through and do really insane damage along the way. And yeah, there you go, guys. That is the tier list. If I want to rearrange anyone, let's fix up these things here a little bit. So yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with the layout. I think it actually kind of fits. It kind of fits. I could actually squeeze them maybe down a little bit. And yeah, I think it's probably a bold choice. You know what? I'm actually going to switch Sigmund. I am going to actually put Sigmund boldly at the bottom of A. People are going to go nuts when they see my A tier. This is very much not an expected A tier. I feel like a lot of people will be swapping the A and the B tier around. Would be where most people would place these champions. But I disagree. I think it's wrong. And this is how I feel it looks. I think with S tier, I think Brogni, Braggo, Herndig, and Tatura are not only amazing champions. In fact, let me separate this slightly. I would actually separate Herndig and Tatura a little bit. If you wanted to put in like an S plus tier, Underpriest Braggo, Underpriest Brogni, and Iron Braggo would be the best two, I think. Just fantastic and go into so many endgame teams. Herndig and Tatura also just incredible, easily up there with endgame comparable champions and showing up in a lot of endgame teams as well. I think the A tier, I think these are just great champions overall. You know, they're more, these are not like necessarily super endgame champions. In fact, I'd say they're not, generally speaking, endgame champions. But what they do is they give the players that need it most, the free-to-play, low-spend players that are earlier or mid-game, it gives them incredibly good champions to progress through content. Sigmund lets you progress through basically everything in the game. Yoshi, specialist for progressing through Doom Tower hard. Vlad, specialist through nuking basically everywhere you need a nuker. Vlad is incredible for it. In the B tier, I think Ashlan and Ruel maybe have a bit more potential in endgame than these A tier guys, but they're not as useful everywhere and they need quite a bit of setup. Mother Cybele and Versilf, I think just solidly B tier, really good supports, keeping your team alive. Yeah, and like debuffing the enemy, all that sort of stuff. I think they're really solid. Rorik and Vildrax for me, they're definitely the weaker ones that I wouldn't really rush out to build because you're not going to be able to build everything. So I'd put them on the back burner compared to all of these ones here. But there you are. Guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? There's going to be some crazy comments from people who skipped right to the end and got annoyed. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.